Philadelphia, I know all the things you do, and I have opened a door for you that no one can close. You have little strength, yet you obeyed my word, and you did not deny me. Look, I will force those who belong to Satan's synagogue, those liars who say they are Jews but are not, to come and bow down at your feet. They will acknowledge that you are the ones I love. Because you have obeyed my command to persevere, I will protect you from the great time of testing that will come upon the whole world to test those who belong to this world. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so that no one will take away your crown. All who are victorious will become pillars in the temple of my God, and they will never have to leave it. And I will write on them the name of my God, and they will be citizens in the city of my God, the new Jerusalem that comes down from heaven from my God. And I will also write on them my new name. Anyone with ears to hear must listen to the Spirit and understand what he's saying to the churches.
Well, we're glad that you're here today as we continue in this series, Dear Church, and it's about 7 letters that Jesus wrote to 7 different churches. Now, typically when we think about letters in the New Testament, we think about Paul writing a letter to someone, we think about Peter writing a letter to someone. We don't think about Jesus himself sending a letter, and Jesus does to 7 churches in modern day Turkey. We've been looking at them this summer. Next week is the last week of the series, and so I'm excited to be here with you and share that one with you. But if this is your first time, I just want to kind of give you a 30,000-foot view of each one of the churches and Jesus's message to them. So the first church, Jesus wrote to Ephesus, and he said that they were the loveless church, that they had left their first love. Then we looked at Smyrna. This was the suffering church. They were going through so much persecution. And then we looked at Pergamum. This was the compromising church. And then Pastor Chad shared with us about Thyatira, and he did a great job, talked about the tolerant church. Last week, we looked at Sardis, which was the dead church. And Jesus was telling them to revive what little remains. And then this week, we're talking about Philadelphia, and this is the faithful church, the faithful church. Now, you probably heard of the city of Philadelphia, not the one in Turkey, but you probably heard of the one in our country, just a few hours from here. And the name for the city just a few hours from us in Pennsylvania was named by William Penn, and he wanted it to be a city where everyone felt loved, where everyone looked out after each other, and they cared for each other. But there is no other connection between the city in our country and the ancient city there in Turkey. The ancient city in Turkey gets its name because it was founded by King Eumenes. And King Eumenes was the king of Pergamum, one of the cities that we've already looked at. And he names it after a nickname that his brother has. He names the city, in fact, for his brother. His brother had a nickname of Philadelphus, or for Philo, for love, and Adelphos, for brother. And so it was the city of brotherly love. It was because his brother had a nickname. Imagine if you have a brother or a sister that they have a nickname that they love you so much, right? And you're like, well, that would be amazing, right? Well, that was the case here for Eumenes' brother. He names it, he has this nickname of Philadelphia, so he names the city in his brother's honor. So it wasn't just a monument or just an idea. This was actually something that went down as a monument for loyalty, for faithfulness. And this was what Jesus' message was to this church as well, that not only does the city have a reputation for being faithful, but this church had a reputation as well. Jesus is saying they may be small, but they are mighty. They have a mighty impact for God's kingdom because of their faithfulness. So as we get started today, have you ever felt small before? Now, when I say small, I don't mean in stature. You know, you're like, I'm living in a land of giants. I'm looking up to everybody. No, that's not what we're talking about when we're saying that you feel small. We're not talking about how tall you are. When I'm saying, if you ever felt small, have you ever felt insignificant before? Or you just feel like, what can I do for God's kingdom? Like, I have no power. You know, I don't have any kind of political clout. I don't have financial clout. I mean, literally, I am VP of nothing, right? Like, no one reports to me at work. You look at my social media, I have literally, you can count them on 2 hands, how many followers I have, right? Like, I have no platform. I have no influence. I mean, I can't really move things forward. Well, this is what this church felt like in Philadelphia, is that they were feeling small. Like they're just like, what clout do we have to move God's kingdom forward? But the message that Jesus gives to the church of Philadelphia, and I think it's the same message that he would give to us, is he says, you are bigger than you think, and you are more powerful than you know because of one simple ingredient. And what would be that one simple ingredient that would make you bigger than you think and more powerful than you know? You know what that one simple ingredient was? It was faithfulness. Faithfulness. This is what this church had going for it. And Jesus said, that's everything that you have going for it. Let me ask you, how many of you wear glasses or maybe readers, or you have a backup pair of glasses, right? That's most of us in this room. Have you ever lost the screw, that little teeny tiny screw that puts the ear? I'm taking from your response, yes, you've experienced that. It's gotten loose a couple of times. And like that one screw, you've never thought about it your entire life, right? Until all of a sudden it gets loose, and it affects every part of your day, doesn't it? I mean, you're trying to keep your glasses on, they keep falling off, you put your head down, then your glasses fall down, you're like, come on. And so you're just like, I need to fix my glasses. Now, can you imagine if you went to your toolbox and you're like, I wonder if this power drill would work, right? Like maybe this will fix my glasses. Well, that would definitely make it worse if you use that one. Or maybe some of you are like, I wonder what kind of screwdriver I had that would fix. And you go into your toolbox, like, I wonder if I kind of use it on the edge maybe, and then maybe that would work. That's not gonna work though, right? What do you need? You don't need a power drill. You don't need a regular size screwdriver. You need a teeny tiny screwdriver. One that you probably haven't thought about in a long time. You've probably even lost it, right? You're like, where is that thing at? This teeny tiny screw that you would never think about. I mean, they're never gonna use that screw in a bridge. They're never gonna use it in some skyscraper. But boy, I'm talking about a small thing having a tremendous impact on your life. That's true. And when you think about the screwdriver, wow, it's the one little thing that can fix it. Now, can you imagine with me for a second if this screwdriver had a personality, all right? Imagine with me. Hey, it sees this big, powerful tool, and it just looks like I'm never gonna be anything in my life, right? Like I don't have power, you can't adjust my torque, I can't be recharged, I'm not even a fun color like orange, there is nothing exciting about my life. And they always pick, when they need something around the house done, which one do they always pick? This one. Which one? Do you know where I live at? I don't even live in the toolbox where all the tools live. Do you know where I live? I live in the junk drawer. And they forget about me. I'm not even important enough to be included with other tools. I'm just in the junk drawer. They forget about me, and then they go through the whole house, and then they eventually remember where they used me. I mean, I can go years without anyone ever picking me up. And of course, we'd be like, wah, 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 But yet, some of us, that's exactly how we feel, don't we? We're just like, why didn't God make me big and powerful and important and the one that always gets picked and used for big assignments? And why do I have to just be this lowly, tiny, small, insignificant screwdriver? We can think that what we do doesn't matter. How will it ever have an impact? I'm not VP of anything. I don't have a big, large platform or followers. No one reports to me. And yet in the midst of that feeling of small, that feeling of insignificance, Jesus writes this letter to the church at Philadelphia who struggled with those same feelings. And so let's pick up part of the letter here. In Revelation 3 and verse 8, Jesus says, I know all of the things you do, and I have opened a door for you that no one can close. You have little strength, yet you obeyed my word and you did not deny me. You know that phrase, little strength? Jesus isn't criticizing them. He's not saying, why aren't you bigger? Why don't you have more influence? Why don't you have more power and sway in your town? That's not what Jesus is saying. He's recognizing that they have little strength, that they have no political clout. They have no religious clout. No one in their city is saying, I wonder what the Christians think. Let's ask the Christians before we, embark on this new societal change. Let's see what they think. Yeah, the schools aren't asking, I wonder how we can honor God in our health classes. There's not a question that they were asking in ancient, in the Roman Empire there in this ancient part of Asia. Boy, they're not asking that of us either, are they? And so he's saying, I know that you have little strength, but Jesus is saying you have one thing in your power, one thing in your corner. And what is it? Jesus says, yet even though you have little strength, you have obeyed my word and you did not deny me. Now remember, in our culture, it's secularized, right? We have pulled religion out of everything. That wasn't true in the ancient world. In the ancient world, in the Roman Empire, in the first century, everything had religion baked into it. Sporting events started off with animal sacrifices to the deities, to the gods. You know, you didn't pledge allegiance to your country's flag. You offered a sacrifice in Caesar's temple claiming that he was Lord over all of the other gods. I mean, it was baked into all of it. So there were so many opportunities for you to deny Christ, for you to go along to get along. There were so many opportunities where it was hard for you to say that, no, Jesus is Lord. And Jesus is saying, despite not having any strength or political power or influence, you have obeyed my word and you did not deny me. And because of that, Jesus is giving them something. And do you know what Jesus is giving them? He's giving them an open door. An open door. Now, why is Jesus giving them an open door? Is it because they were the largest church? No. Was it because they had the best-selling worship album? No. Was it because they had the most campuses of any other church in their country? No. In fact, they were small. They were insignificant. And Jesus is saying, I'm giving you an open door. Why? Because of your faithfulness to me. Now, a lot of times, Christians today, when we think about open doors, what do we think about? We think about promotion. We think about a new job. We think about God's gonna give me a bigger platform. We think about fame. We think about success. This is not how it's used in Scripture. Over and over again, when our scriptures talk about God giving us an open door, what is he saying he's opening the door for? It's for us to move his kingdom forward. It's an opportunity to share the gospel, an opportunity to talk about who Jesus is and why he came. Listen to how Paul uses this same phrase throughout Scripture. In 1 Corinthians, Paul says this, there's a wide open door for what? For a great work here, although many oppose me. An open door for the message of Jesus. Notice what he says in 2 Corinthians. Paul says, when I came to the city of Troas to preach the good news of Christ, the gospel, the Lord opened a door of opportunity for me. What is the door that's open for him to move God's kingdom forward? Notice in Colossians what it says. He says, and pray for us too, that God may open a door for our message so that we may proclaim the mysteries of Christ for which I am in chains. The open door is the open door for the gospel to begin to share it. But you know, when we feel insignificant, when we feel small, what do we think? Well, I need to get bigger before God can use me. Then maybe when God makes me bigger, more important, gives me more influence on the platform, then maybe God will open a door for me and I'll walk through it. Oftentimes, the doors that God opens for us are not grand, huge doors. They're very small doors. And sometimes we can discount those doors and think, well, I may be insignificant, but that door is definitely insignificant. Do you know what open doors often sound like? Open doors often sound like when someone at work says, man, it has just been the worst week of my life. You should be like, God just opened the door for the gospel right now. When you meet someone in your kids' sports and they're like, hey, I'm new to the area. That's an open door that God has opened for us. When your neighbor says, you know, I'm really struggling with loneliness. Open door. God has opened it. But that door feels too small for us, doesn't it? It feels insignificant for us. It feels like, I want some grand, big door that then I have a huge platform to then tell people about Jesus. But he's saying, I'm opening these small doors for you. And you know what I find is that as you walk through this door, that then God opens another door for the gospel and another door for the gospel of faithfulness. But we don't like that word, do we? And part of the challenge for us is we confuse prominence with significance. Here, and don't miss this. We think that if it's not visible, it's not valuable. And we think because we aren't visible, that we aren't valuable to God's kingdom. And we think because I'm not prominent, because I'm not well known, because I don't have a platform or follower, then I'm not significant to God's kingdom. But we confuse those things all the time. Many times, in fact, the things that are unseen are very significant. For example, how many of you thought about your kidneys today? Unless you're on dialysis, you probably did not think about your kidneys. It's probably been years since you've thought about your kidneys, right? Now, if I ask you, how many of you thought about your face today? Don't raise your hands, right? You're looking in the mirror and you're like, I don't think that night cream's working so well. And it's just that was a scam. I knew it was a scam, you know? And then you looked at your hair, you know, and like, ooh, I need to make an appointment. I see my roots, you know, or, oh, they're a little bit more gray. I definitely need to get that highlights. Well, if that was you this morning, I have zero sympathy for you about your hair and your roots and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, good. But, you know, listen, you can live without your hair. I am proof positive of that. You know what I mean? But your kidneys, on the other hand, I don't want to give testimony to that, right? It's unseen. You don't think about it. But just because it's not prominent, doesn't mean that it's not significant, that it's not important. And we so confuse visibility and value. But God doesn't see it that way. And God was looking at this church in Philadelphia and he says, listen, I know that you have little strength. You don't have a lot of influence, but you're very, very important to what I'm doing in this kingdom, in my kingdom and in this city. So maybe let's approach it from a different way. What if I ask you to name the 10 of the largest churches you can think of in our country? 10 churches that most people would recognize who are Christians. I think you would struggle to name 10. I think you would get around 5 or 6, as I've tried this with other people. You get around 5 or 6, I'm like, I'm surprised I can't think of other names. You might even struggle to name 10 churches in the capital region that most people would recognize. But guess how many churches are in our country? Do you know how many churches are in our country? Over 300,000 churches. And we struggle to name 10 of them, right? We struggle to name 10. But over 3, you know what that tells me? That tells me God does most of his work from unknown people in unknown places. Does that mean that they're unimportant? No, of course not. In fact, I would say to the person that you are ministering to, the person that I'm ministering to, you are the most important person in the world. To the person who feels lonely and you walk through that door, they don't care about such and such church or such and such pastor or such and such worship leader. They care about you. You are the most important person to them in the world. Why? Because you have so many followers, because you have so much religious clout, so much money? No, because you cared about them to show them who Jesus is and to share the message of Jesus with you. You see, the world may never hear your name, but Jesus knows it by heart. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Where Jesus said, I see your deeds. That's what he says to the church in Revelation. And Jesus says the same thing to each one of us. I see your deeds. I see the things that you're doing that no one else sees to move my kingdom forward. And it matters to me. Keep being faithful even in the small things, even if no one else ever knows your name. Do you know what I think is going to happen? When Jesus sees you, he's going to be clapping for you. Jesus is going to give you a hug. Jesus is going to say, thank you. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You know, Jesus doesn't say, well done, my good and popular servant, my good and powerful servant. He says, well done, my good and faithful servant. Thank you. Thank you for being faithful. Thank you for walking through the doors that God, when Jesus would say, that God opened for you. But we don't like the word faithfulness, do we? Faithfulness sounds like drudgery, doesn't it? It sounds boring. It sounds routine. Can you add some spice into that? Faithfulness doesn't sound good. You know what word we like? We like the word fruitfulness. Now, fruitful, show me how to be fruitful. Can you give me 5 verses on being fruitful and 3 steps and a shortcut? I'm all in with it. There's a huge difference between faithfulness and fruitfulness. Here's the difference. Faithfulness is us being obedient to God. Fruitfulness is the result of obedience. Faithfulness, that's something that I can control. You cannot control fruitfulness, but God controls that fruitfulness. And what's faithfulness? That's your role, my role. That's what God asks us to do. And the fruitfulness part, that is up to God. In fact, this is what Paul says in his letter to Galatians, the Christians living in Galatia. He says this, he says, so let's not get tired of doing what's good. Boy, do we ever get tired of doing what's good. What is that? That's called faithfulness. He says, at just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. What is the reaping? That's fruitfulness, right? And he was saying, at just the right time. When is the right time? Well, for me, it was yesterday, right? Yes, let's reap a harvest yesterday, not today. Jesus said, or Paul's writing here and he's saying, the right time is when God says it's the right time. It's not when you think it's the right time. It's not when you feel like it's the right time. It's not when you feel like you've been faithful enough. He was just saying at the right time. And what is the right time? The right time might be when God's plan for what he's doing in the world is aligned with what you're doing. And at the right time, it might be when you're ready, when you're mature, when you're growing. Or God is saying, at the same time, it doesn't matter what the right time is. God is saying, I want you to be faithful right where I have placed you. So here's the bottom line today. If you don't get anything else, this is what I want you to remember. Okay, you ready? Here it is. Faithfulness is the soil that fruitfulness grows in. Faithfulness is the soil in which fruitfulness grows in. We're calling this series, Dear Church, what we're getting right, what we're getting wrong. So what was the church in Philadelphia getting wrong? Do you know there's absolutely nothing they were getting wrong? Jesus doesn't offer them any correction at all. Jesus isn't saying, well, you're small and you'd be a lot bigger if you did these things. No, Jesus doesn't offer them any correction at all. In fact, Jesus just offers them encouragement. Of the 7 churches, 2 of them, Smyrna and this one, were the only ones that didn't receive any correction. And Jesus is reaching out to them and saying, listen, it can be discouraging at times to feel like you're insignificant, that you're not doing anything. But he's saying you are very, very significant to my kingdom and what I'm doing. Kind of reminds me of bamboo. You ever seen any bamboo or bamboo forests? You ever planted bamboo? You're like, no, but I ate some bamboo one time, But the interesting thing about bamboo is you plant it, and for 4 years, nothing happens. Can you imagine that? You don't see anything pop out of the soil. You'd be like, I got some bad seeds on Amazon. I want a refund, And then they send you some more, and you're like, these seeds didn't work either. Where's your supplier from? I got to get them somewhere else. Nothing is happening for 4 years. And then something crazy happens the 5th year. You know what happens on year 5? On year 5, it grows 90 feet in 6 weeks. Isn't that crazy? 9 stories tall in 6 weeks. Why? There was so much stuff that was happening under the surface. So much stuff that was happening of faithfulness, of building the roots, of being faithful for what God called it before anything was ever visible to anyone else. So what if we personalize Revelation 3 and verse 8? What Jesus wrote to the church, not just the individuals, but the church. Remember what we've been saying in this series? We're saying, if it's true of you, it's also true of us. That's how it becomes true of us, is it has to be true for you. But what if you imagine Jesus saying this to you today, to our church, to say, I see you. I see you. I know what you're doing that no one else knows. I see how you work so hard for me. It's not lost on me. It's very important. Jesus saying, even though you feel like you have little strength, even though no one knows your name, I know your name. And you are so important to moving my kingdom forward. What if God is saying, I'm opening a door for you right now. I'm opening a door for you this week. If you would just walk through that door. You see, we live in a place much like Philadelphia, where we live on the outskirts, on the edge, on the fringe. You know, Philadelphia was a city that was established to help spread Hellenism, which is Greek culture, all throughout Asia. And here they were on the edge of it. You know, we don't live in the Bible Belt, right? We live on the edge, the fringe of Christianity. No one asks us, I wonder what the Christians think we should do. No one cares about what Christians think when it comes to education. We have very little influence here in our state. But what if Jesus said, I see what you're doing. What you're doing matters to my kingdom, and I want you to be faithful to continue doing it. You know, we don't live in a metropolitan area, do we? I mean, we don't live in like New York City. We don't live in Boston. We don't live in Philadelphia. In fact, when you tell people where you live at, you never probably say the actual town, do you? Like, where are you from? You know, say like, oh, I'm from Clifton Park. I'm from Half Moon. I'm from Mechanicville. You know, I'm from Malta. I'm from Latham or Burnt Hills. What do you say? Typically we say, well, I'm from Albany. And of course, that doesn't help anything either, does it? People are like, where's Albany? Is that near Buffalo? And you're like, oh man. But you know, Albany even has a nickname, doesn't it? What's our nickname? Smallbany, right? I mean, it's like, oh, how small can you get? You know, even our biggest city is called small, right? And we don't live in a metropolitan area. But man, the work that you and I are doing, that our church is doing for God's kingdom is so important. What if you believe that God put you here on the front lines for a reason? For a reason. And that God doesn't want you in some Bible Belt place where there's lots of people to tell people about Christ. But he puts you here where the fields are wide into harvest, where there are so many opportunities for you and me to share and show the love of Jesus. Faithfulness is the soil in which fruitfulness grows. So today, I think Jesus would say to all of us, I see you. I know your name. What you're doing matters so much. Don't stop. Keep being faithful. Let's pray together today. Would you just pray and would you just say, Jesus, thank you for placing me here in the capital region. Would you say, Jesus, help me to see the open doors that you've already provided for me, that I might tend to discount, that I might tend to overlook. Would you say, God, I want to be faithful to what you've called me to do. I want to hear that when I see you. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Father, today, we thank you for your love for us. We thank you for your reminder to this church in Philadelphia and this church who felt like it didn't have a lot of influence or power. And God, we thank you for the influence that you've given us as a church. And we want to steward that in a way that brings you glory and honor. And Father, it gets us excited to think about each person who calls Starpoint home. What would it look like for us to walk through the doors that you open for us? How that collectively together begins to have a tremendous impact for your kingdom. Father, that's our desire. That's our prayer, is to see every man, woman, and child here in the capital region confess you as Lord. Help us, Lord, to continue to be faithful in the good that you've called us to do. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.